Hello friends, this is Old Dad coming to you from the mountains of southeast Tennessee again. I have another one of my Train Simulator Classic tips and tricks tutorials for you. Today I want to talk about something that recently came up on the Railworks America Train Simulator Classic forum. Now you can go Google Railworks America and find a wealth of good information about the simulator, and you might want to join the forum and converse with fellow simulator enthusiasts, or just search and learn through the many years of available forum pages. Once a member, you can offer your own suggestions and help in order for others to learn to use and enjoy the simulator that we all like the best, or we wouldn't be here, right? So to get on with why we are here today, I have for a long time wondered how or even if you could change the manual switch stands in a given route. Recently, the question was posed on the forum, and one of the great members there posted a response that I tried, and it worked like a charm for me. I decided I wanted to get a visual aid out there with this tutorial to help others. So first of all, why would you want to change a manual switch stand? Well, in my case, when I got all excited about doing my route, which is based on the Cowan-Pusher District and the Tracy City branch of the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis Railway, which later became the Louisville and Nashville, and of course the CSX Railway today, I followed the tutorials that I could find regarding route editing. I dove right into things and quickly started trying to create my route. One of the first things you are required to do is pick a track rule. This is necessary as it is defined in the simulator. This picks the version of track textures you will be using to create your epic route. Well, me being all too excited to get started creating, I picked the pin coal route for my track rule textures, mainly because I liked that coal mining route. So I dove into learning to lay track and gave no real consideration to the era or period of time my route was going to be and how I wanted the end result of that product to appear. Pin coal is set in the modern era, and the switch stands are similar to the old railroad standard New Century brand prototypes, and they have the new back-saving ergonomic handles that most railroads are using today on these 1900 era switch stands. My route would be considered 1970s, which is long before this handle innovation was used. As I have progressed, I have decided I want a tall switch stand for my main track switches and a low one for my yard and industry switches, reflecting the standard of the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis. Perhaps you might prefer another design stand or would like a variety of different stands based upon when they were installed on your prototype. Regardless of your motivation, here's how you can try to do it. So here we are in Palmer, Tennessee on the route that I'm creating, and Palmer is located on the Tracy City branch of the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis, and then the railroad here was abandoned about 1973, so this type of modern switch stand would not be appropriate in a railroad of that era. So I want to change this out to also for the reason that the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis would have had a tall switch stand on their main line switches. And this is the main track of the branch line with the house track for the Palmer station located here. I need to show you that I've successfully installed a high stand on the other end of this siding to verify that this method works. And in the process I learned a couple of things that may hinder your ability to do this, and we're going to show those to you now. But you can see I've installed a switch stand, a high switch stand from the inline route out of Train Simulator, which is a Norfolk Southern Railway route, and this is very similar to a Southern Railway switch stand. The target is a Southern Railway switch target, and the stand is very similar to what the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis would have used. However, the target is not correct for my route, but since I cannot create assets, I'm not able to modify this and put the correct target on it. Someday I will learn to do that, I hope, and will be able to put my correct Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis target on this stand. In the meantime, I'm going to learn to be happy with at least having a high switch stand that, even though the target is not quite railroad appropriate, it's better than having the very wrong era low switch stand on a mainline switch. So let's cruise back down here to the other end of the siding, and we're going to attempt to put in this high switch stand here. A couple of things that I've learned in the process. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to leave the world here and go to the route editor, and here we have this triangle, which is the start of the switch. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to split the track right here, which is going to eliminate this switch stand, and then when I weld the track back together, it's going to bring my new inline switch target and stand into position. I will have to adjust it into the final position. Now let's go over here to the track rule for a moment and look. You see that I've already got inline highlighted here. Normally on my route construction I would have the pin coal route showing here, and the assets for the pin coal track would appear here in the asset list. Now that I'm going to use the inline for the high switch stand, I'm going to click on inline, and that appears here in the track rule. And now the inline assets are appearing up here, and I'm going to use the main track yard switch stand. Now, first thing I'm going to do is split the track here at this triangle. I go up here to the tools under the linear objects, and I click split. And I come down here and I aim this either direction. I click on that, and notice that it created one bumper here. I've discovered in some cases it will allow you to go ahead and install the switch stand with only one bumper here. The next step in doing this is, after you've selected your track that you want to use, which is NL, the inline main track yard is what I want to use. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to weld this piece of track back together. And when I do that, the correct inline switch stand should appear here. So I'm now going to hit the weld button, and you see the weld box appeared over the top just like normal, and when I click on that, it's going to weld the track back together, and my inline switch stand should appear. And there it is. This is a little unusual with only having the one track bumper here. Sometimes you should have two that appear, and that's what I'm used to seeing when you're going to do a weld. In this case it worked. However, before this tutorial is over, I'm going to show you a case where it did not work. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit the undo button and show you how everything appears with two track bumpers indicating the location that needs to be welded. So let's split it again. I came over here and I drop it down. Remember, we pointed the arrow in the forward direction. Now I'm going to point it directly back at me and click it, and look, two bumpers appeared. Don't know why, but that's the way it worked. So now let's hit the weld button again. There's our weld box. When I weld it, same result. We have our new tall switch stand here. I'm now going to move it in its correct position, and I will demonstrate how to do that. I have the TS14 radio button ticked because I like that better than I do the one that you get for X and Y when you don't do that. Here's the X and Y without that button ticked. Here it is with the button ticked. I like this much better. So it's what your preference really is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin this switch stand around because I want my tall switch stand to be on this side of the track. And I'm going to swing it around using that bar on the little ball, using the blue bar here. Now I'm going to pick that up and move it down to where it is at the points. Typically your switch stand operating levers and rods all pass through the first eye between these two ties. I'm going to push this up here. I just grabbed it and clicked. Left click, move it over, and I'm going to put it there. And now I'm going to get it out approximately the right distance from the edge of the track so that looks appropriate. Now let's look it over and see what we need to do. As I was stating, usually the connecting rod for any switch stand passes through this opening between these two ties, or this eye, and now I'm going to lower it down, and I'm going to put it slightly below the level of the existing ties there. Sometimes you got to work your way around a little bit and get into a different position so you can have a little more finesse with this operating, but we can get it down pretty close. Now I've also got it centered up. I've got this operating rod centered between so we have the best appearance. But you notice the ties for the NS inline don't exactly match up with the ties in this pin coal switch. I'm going to have to do a little trade-off on that and choose to not let my rivet counting gene get too caught up in is it perfect or not. So I'm going to right click and now we'll look and see that doesn't look too bad. Now I've got it pretty well leveled up, and so we now have a high switch stand where I wanted a high switch stand from a different route. I've not tried any other routes besides the inline as far as trying to insert a different switch machine, but I'm sure it's going to work in a similar manner. Okay, at this point what I want to do is I want to save what I've got going on here, and we're going to try this switch stand out. So I'm going to go over here to the play button. Do I need to save the changes? Click OK. And now here's my switch stand installed, and the little operating lever appears, and when I click it, look what happens. It now functions as a high switch stand. That's a big thumbs up from me to the folks that helped us out to figure out how to do this. Now we're going to go down and do a third switch, which I had a little anomaly in this switch. And the anomaly is sometimes when you're dealing with Train Simulator, it's one of the things that happens and you're installing a switch. Let's go into the world editor. And you get a switch installed. You can see that there's a little line showing here at the top of the rail, like there's a little mismatch in these rails, and that indeed is the case. Now I want to show you what happens here if that's the case. When I installed this switch, I didn't do a proper job of getting all the little elevation markers. When you click on the gradient markers here, there's actually 3 different markers inside this one tower right here, which I'm going to bring them all apart here and I'm going to show you. And at their height is at when it locks in there is at 548.95 meters. That's the elevation that this switch is set at, and that's created a problem for me as I found out. So I came in here to this switch to change it out because I want a high stand here, and when I arrived to do that, I was going to split it at the normal location where the triangle is, and I clicked split, and I got the one bumper here, and unless this makes a liar out of me this time, when I click the weld button, I'm still on inline in my track rule, so I get my new switch stand. When I click the weld rule, it made a liar out of me and it went ahead and put it in here. The time before when I did that, before I started my tutorial, it would not give me the weld box with this single bumper here, and I don't know why. Because all the other welds that I've mostly done in the past required the double bumper in order to have that. So don't know the exact reason that it did that. I'm going to undo here for the moment, and I'm going to show you what I determined I thought was the reason why it did that. I'm going to go to the elevation markers here, and I'm going to fix this elevation because you can clearly see there's an issue with the rail head there. It's not a smooth. It looks like a loose joint in real life. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at these elevation markers, and I want to explain this just a little bit. You can have up to 3 markers inside this, and each one of them will kind of highlight itself differently. Let's drop this one down to any dimension underneath slightly, and you see now I've separated one from the other 2. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to separate another one. I'm going to raise it up. And now you see that there are 3 markers in here. And it can be a very frustrating thing when you're getting all the switches lined up. What that does is it allows you to, the various ways that these switches are built up, where you've got the diverging track and you've got the points and you've got the straight track, all of that needs to come together at the same height, and this is the way that the program allows you to do that. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to set all of these at my original height, which is the 548.95, and one of those before I know for a fact was at 548.96. One of them was slightly out. So I'm going to pick the 548.95 and I want to bring the other 2 down to that location very carefully. 548.95. I'm going to bring the one underneath up to 548.95. And when we come back and look, I think that looks a little better. In any event, that's what I ran into. When I corrected that, I was then able to get the split and the weld operation to work the way that it should. Now I've got the double bumper, and I'm going to hit the weld. There's my weld box. I'm still connected to inline over here on my track rule, and there's my high switch stand, which I want. And this one I'm going to put on the opposite side of the track over here. So we're going to highlight that and we're going to rotate it around, and then I'm going to move it out and move it into position. Now I'm going to get the elevation correct, where it's just barely below the surface. And see what that looks like. Need to go down just a little bit more. Now I think I've got it. So now I've got this one installed and ready to go. I'm going to click Save, check it out, and look at that, it works. So I hope you understood what I was trying to tell you there. If it doesn't give you the weld box, it could be that there is a disparity in the 3 elevation markers that would be there. You need to get that number set for all of them to be the same. One more thing that I want to show you in this little tutorial, which I hope this has been helpful to you on learning how to install or change a different switch stand. Sometimes when you're wind up creating a route, and this is an incomplete area that I'm working on, when you're working on creating a route, you'll create a scenario and you'll go driving down the route, and all of a sudden you come upon a switch that's not lined in the direction that you thought it should be lined when it's a manual junction. And it's very easy to correct that if you go into the World Editor, and for instance this is the main stem, and I would like that to be the normal position of this switch, lined for the main stem, so and not the siding as it is right now. So what I can do is I can come in and hit the 9 key, the numeral 9, which opens up the map that shows you all the locations of switches and everything. And if you come in here and you click that switch button in the map, and then you go up here and you hit 2D view, 2D map, now you can see that the points are aligned for the straight rail, which is the way I want it. But this target's still wrong. Watch what happens when I click Save. Now that switch in your scenarios will be lined in the direction that you want it to be on a manual route. nothing's more frustrating than to create a scenario and then as you're going along you take a diverging route because you didn't observe that the switch was not aligned correctly for your movement. Now at this point I'm going to find me a switch stand that would be a different style low switch stand to go here, because this is really in the coal yard of Palmer where they are loading the coal cars, which is the whole reason for the railroad to come to Palmer. And there were a couple of different loadouts that I'm in the process of installing and getting scenic into the area. This was a very large operation, and I haven't quite found the correct asset to go over 5 tracks plus a runaround to put the empties up at the end of the track. So I have a lot of work to do on my route, but this gives you some idea of some of the things that you might get into when you're creating a route. And when you do put the effort into it, I think it's quite rewarding to see your work completed and looking good as you create the route. I try to make my routes be as realistic as I possibly can. We got some folks out here enjoying the afternoon picnic in the summertime in good old Tennessee. So I hope this has been some help to you, and that you found some use for this. As always, I like to learn new ways of doing things, and if you have a better way of doing something or a constructive suggestion about the simulator or my tutorial, just kindly leave me a comment in the video. You might be helping others master the program. Also, I hope you enjoyed my tutorial and will leave me a like. Check out my other tutorials. I'm a slow-talking, long-winded boy from the South, and that's why my tutorials are long. Have fun. Until next time, be safe and God bless.